Hey guys, I am so excited for episode 1 of the Taste and See podcast. This has been on my heart for a long time now, but it just was never the right time, or I was just putting it off like, no thanks, God. Like, that's a big step, like doing a podcast and putting it out there, and what if no one listens to it, or, just all these different lies and doubts that I was having. But recently, a friend just encouraged me, like, Julia, if you like keep putting this off and, saying like, oh God, I'm not ready, or this isn't for me. Well, it's like, when will you 100% be ready? Like, when will you like fully just 100% like be like fully ready to do something that you might like, like something that the Lord might have placed on your heart. Um, but it's like sometimes you have to take that step of faith. You just have to step into something and just take a leap of faith, even if it might be scary or it might be uncertain. And so here we are, starting the Taste and See podcast. I'm so excited just to see where the Lord takes this, and just I'm excited to learn and grow with you guys. So episode 1 is really just going to be about sharing what the heart behind the Taste and See podcast is, and what we will be talking about on the podcast, and just some of my story I'm sharing with you guys, just so we can get to know each other more. And yeah, so let's dive into it. So the message behind this podcast comes from Psalms 34:8, which says, "Taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the one that finds refuge in him." So this verse has really been kind of like my life motto for some time now. Through different seasons of my life, whether they be good or bad, it has really just been my like motto I've clung to, like, just taste and see that the Lord is good, and just find refuge in him, and to cling to him in both the good and the bad times. And it's definitely meant different things to me in different seasons. For example, whenever I've been like in good seasons of my life, it's been like, God is good, like he's so good, I'm gonna follow him forever, and just it's sunshine and rainbows and everything is great. And it's easy to like proclaim that verse whenever things are going my way, or things are just well in life. But there's definitely been seasons in my life that have been a lot harder and a lot more challenging, and it's easy then to be like, okay, God, I'm gonna just taste and see that you're good, I'm gonna find refuge in you, even when things are really hard, or I'm not really sure what the next steps in my life are going to be like, or I'm going through some really hard things. It just is still like choosing to find refuge in the Lord, and to trust him even whenever I don't even know what the next step is going to look like. And so it's in those seasons of, honestly, the wilderness. It's whenever it's kind of lonely, and I'm like, okay, God, like, where are you? It's okay, will I choose to trust God? Will I choose to seek him first? Will I choose to keep pursuing him even whenever life is hard and I'm not sure really what's going on, or like what really life is? And so it's like, okay, well, I know that God is good. I know that he's faithful. He's been faithful to me time and time again. And he's not going to just leave me here. He's not just going to leave me in the wilderness to, perish and, to just die of like hunger or starvation, spiritually or physically. But he is going to be with me every step of the way, whether that be in the mountaintops, whether that be in the valley, whether that be in the wilderness and in the lonely times. I know that God remains good. And so it honestly makes me think of the Israelites in Exodus, whenever, Moses had led the Israelites out of Egypt, and, God had set them free. He had sent the plagues, and, finally Pharaoh was like, okay, just go, after the final plague, which had taken his firstborn son. And, the Israelites had left Egypt, and, they were excited, and they were like, ready, and God had been faithful. He had set them free. And then he parted the Red Sea, and the Israelites walked through the Red Sea, and then, God closed the Red Sea, and it came crashing down on the Egyptians that were following the Israelites. And, God provided a way, and he literally parted an entire sea so that his chosen people could walk through it and could get to dry ground and, on their way to the promised land. Well, after that, the Israelites are, wandering in the wilderness, and it's hot, and they're hungry, and they're tired, and they're starting to doubt, like, okay, God, like, where are you taking us? Like, I thought that we were, headed to the promised land. Like, what's up, God? But, and so there's even a verse in Exodus. I think it's Exodus chapter 16. I'm going to read it for you guys. So it says, verse 1 says, "The entire Israelite community departed from Elim and came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they had left the land of Egypt. The entire Israelite community grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. The Israelites said to them, 'If only we had died by the Lord's hand in the land of Egypt, when we sat by pots of meat and ate all the bread we wanted. Instead, you brought us into this wilderness to make this whole assembly die of hunger.'" And so they're literally like, we'd rather go back to Egypt where we had meat, we had food, even though we were literally in captivity and we were, doing hard manual labor, and we were, our people were suffering, and they had been for years and years, but they'd rather go back to that than stay in the wilderness and, continue to go towards the promised land, even though God had promised that he would take them there and that he would be faithful and that he would not leave them to die like in the wilderness. But they started to doubt. They're like, "God, like, where are you? What are you doing? We're hungry. We're tired. We want to go back to Egypt." And obviously the Lord provided and he was faithful, but that kind of reminds me of, like, seasons of our own life where, like, even me, where say I'm in a season of wilderness where, things might be lonely, things might be hard, and I'm really just doubting the Lord's goodness and his faithfulness. It's like, God, like, even though there were, seasons where I was in sin, or seasons where, I, like, wasn't thriving, or I, was going through different things, I'd rather be back in that than in this wilderness, because like, I'm so alone, and I'm tired, and I'm spiritually hungry, and I'm doubting you. But it's like, I'd rather go back to those hard things than, like, stay in this, which, makes sense. But because, like, no one, I mean, honestly, like, who likes the wilderness? Like, the wilderness is hard, it's brutal whenever, things aren't going your way. But it's like, will we choose to trust, and will we choose to remain faithful to the Lord, because he's always remained faithful to us. He has been with us time and time again. And, if you go on in Exodus 16, it talks about how the Lord provides, and he provides the manna for the Israelites to eat. But he doesn't provide just this, entire mass amount of manna where they just, collect all this manna and have it for days and days and days. No, he provides it one day at a time, and he gives them what they need. And so, he sets out manna for them on the ground, and they gather it, but the Lord commands them, no, like, you only get to collect manna for one day at a time, and you can only eat this manna for this day, and then I'm going to provide it the next day, and you'll get more manna then. And then, on the Sabbath, he has them collect enough for the Sabbath so they don't have to collect manna then, but he provides only what they need on that specific day. And, that makes us think of our own lives. Like, for me, like, God gives us what we need one day at a time. He doesn't always give us, just the whole entire path, or the whole entire, amount at the same time. He gives us what we need one day at a time. And so if you're in a season right now where things might be uncertain, or you're lonely, or you're going through some really hard things, know that the Lord will provide. And you might only see one step at a time, and you might only, see just a little bit of the path in front of you, but trusting that God will still remain faithful, that he'll still provide for you even when things are hard, just like he did for the Israelites. Even when they were complaining and they were tired and they were doubting, he still was faithful, and he still showed up for them, and he still gave them what they needed, even whenever all they did was, complain and doubt God and all the things. They didn't hold up their side of being faithful, but God held up his side, and he was always faithful and he was always good. And honestly, in my own life, whenever I've gone through seasons of wilderness, in those seasons, God has used that to refine and purify me so much. And it might be a lonely season where it feels like I'm alone, but in that, God is using that season to draw me near to Him and bring me closer to Him and help me to seek first His kingdom and to put my eyes solely on His and to look at Him and not look at the things around me and the things of this world, but to truly focus in on who God says He is, what is He calling me to, where is He calling me to. And those seasons of wilderness can be so intentional in your life because, one, they're drawing you near to God, and two, it honestly can help you just stop and pause and just reevaluate your life, because sometimes when life is good and when everything is going great and well in your life, it can be easy to not really need God, honestly, or it feels that way where oh God, we don't need you right now because we have everything we need. And us as humans tend to, whenever things are going well, not kind of push God away and become oh, and sit on the throne of our lives oh, this is kind of nice. I mean, things are going well. I'm in control of my life. I can do what I want. But the reality is, whenever we're in control of our own lives, things tend to head south a lot because, whenever we're in control, we can't see the whole picture. We can only see what's right in front of us, whereas God can see the whole picture, and He knows and is ordaining our steps every step of the way throughout our lives, and He knows the whole picture. And whereas we're humans, we can only see what's right in front of us, and we might have plans for the future or things we hope to accomplish, but we don't actually know what's going to happen. Whereas God, He knows the entire future. He knows exactly what's going to happen and when it's going to happen. And so if we give control of our lives to God and to His faithfulness, He's going to provide. And it's honestly going to be so much smoother, even when things are hard, whenever we choose to trust God, because, He is an almighty God that has us. And so the second part of the verse, Psalms 34:8, talks about blessed is the one that finds refuge in Him. And so whenever we find refuge in the Lord, and when we choose, to hide under the shelter of His wings, and we choose to seek Him first, and when we choose to find refuge in God, there will be so much more peace, so much more joy, even when you're walking through hard things. Because when you're in the shelter of His wings and you're under the shadow of the Almighty, you are there and He has you. Whereas, there might be the storm all around you, but when you're in His refuge and when you're in His circle of peace, there'll be so much more peace that comes through that. And so you might be going through some really hard times, but whenever you choose to put your eyes on Jesus and you choose to seek Him first, then the storm won't seem as brutal. It won't seem as intense. Just like Peter, when he walked on water, he got out of the boat whenever Jesus told him to come to Him. And he got out of the boat and he had his eyes on Jesus and he was walking towards Him. And he was walking on water. I mean, it was through Jesus, but that's so powerful. He was literally walking on the ocean. And, he had his eyes on Jesus and everything was going well. But when he started looking around, he noticed how intense the storms were. And he saw, the thunder. He heard the thunder and he saw the lightning and he saw the waves and everything. And he started focusing on the storm around him rather than what was right in front of him, which was Jesus. And so whenever he did that, he started sinking because he was focused on the storm, not the one that was going to calm the storm, which was Jesus, and the one, who literally created the sea and the storm. And Jesus is the author of all things. He's the author of life, and He created that. But Peter chose to focus on, the things that was happening around him rather than the one that was right in front of him, which was Jesus. And I've been guilty of my own life. In my own life of doing that, choosing to focus on the storm all around me rather than Jesus, who always has me, who's always right there. And sometimes it's easy to be like, God, where are you? I don't see you. Aren't you supposed to always be with me? But then I have to be like, okay, wait, Julia, how are you spending your time? And what are you choosing to prioritize? oh, you've been spending a lot of time on social media or on your phone doing who knows what, just scrolling and scrolling. And, I look up and like a couple hours have passed by when I could have been using that to, spend time in the Word, spend time with my family, do things that will make an impact. Whereas I've just been, scrolling on my phone, just mindless. I pick up my phone and use it just as like a time filler, if I'm just like waiting around on someone or something. But then it becomes more of a time waster whenever I'm, it's consuming me, and it's, becomes almost like this idol, or I just like will pick it up whenever I'm not doing anything because, oh, it's just, I'm going to pick up my phone because I have to have something to do. Whereas, I need to be more intentional about just setting it down and looking around me, looking, at like what like God has for me all around me, and not missing those moments of, like little just moments of joy throughout the day. And sometimes I can feel distant from the Lord, but it's like, okay, well, how much time have you been spending with Him? Have you been choosing to seek Him first, and to spend time in the Word and spend time in intentional prayer? Which, prayer can look different. It can be quick. It can be like, God, Lord, help me on this certain thing. Or, it can also be just intentional prayer and truly just sitting and being still before Him and hearing what He has for you. And also, just speaking to Him like a friend and like a father that He is. And also, there's just, in this society, it's so easy just to get caught in all the busyness and being distracted by all the things of this world. And I can get so busy where I like, it might be a lot of good things that I'm doing, where, I might be volunteering at my church, or I might be, going to a college group, or just all these different things that are really good. But if I'm so busy that I don't have time to just, sit still before the Lord and just to sit in His presence, then like, okay, I need to reevaluate my priorities. Even if those are all good things, I still need to make sure that I have my priorities straight. I'm spending time in God's Word. I'm, prioritizing my family and my friends and all those different things. And also, I've learned just prioritizing myself as well, and knowing that there's freedom in the word no. And saying no doesn't mean like that you don't want to do it or that that thing isn't good. It just sometimes means saying no so that it opens up another opportunity that might be just as good, whether that be, just having a night at home where I can just truly just let my body be still and calm before the next day, or just whatever that might look like. Going back to the topic of just the wilderness and being in a wilderness season, over the past few months, I've been in a wilderness season myself. Um, so at the end of last summer, I worked at camp the whole summer, which was so fun, and I love camp with my whole heart. It is just a joy getting to just see kids just learn about Jesus and get excited about Jesus. And so at the end of last summer, I was on my way home from camp, and it was late, and because we had been, cleaning up camp that day, we had a staff banquet, just all the final things. And I was on my way home from the staff banquet, and I was exhausted from camp. I had just really spread myself thin, just pouring into the campers. Um, but really, I don't think taking care of myself as much as I needed to, which is something I'm still learning how to do. And I was on my way home, and I was around like 15 minutes from my house, and it was late at night, and I was on the highway, and I was sleepy, but I'm like, no, like I got this. I'm only 15 minutes away from my house. Like I can do this. Well, that did not turn out the best, because I I fall asleep and I wake up and I'm spinning and I'm hitting trees, and I hear like thump, thump, thump. And I'm like, oh goodness. And I'm like, so I wake up, and I literally, my life is flashing before my eyes, and I'm like, Lord, like, please help me. And because I think I'm like, this is it, like, this is over. But I'm like, Lord, please help me. And so I jerk the wheel, and that causes me to spin and everything. But thankfully, I hit a tree, and so I stop, and I'm kind of out of it, like looking around, But then I smell smoke and I see smoke at the front of my car, and I'm like, oh, I need to get out of here. And so I grab my phone, and there's shattered glass everywhere. So I get out of the car, and on my side of the car, it's like it looks like nothing's wrong. I'm like, okay, well maybe I can still drive my car home, and everything will be fine. But then I go around to the other side, and it's totaled. It's crunched in on the side. The fender's broken, the glass is shattered, just the whole deal. And I'm like, oh goodness. And so I call my mom. It's really early in the morning too, and so I call her, and she answers, and she's like, she knows something's wrong, and I could hear the panic in her voice, and I think that's really when it hit me, like, oh, like I just wrecked, I just almost died, like the Lord just saved me, like this is crazy. And I think in that moment, I also just realized just how truly like sacred and precious life is. Like, it's here today and gone tomorrow. And, that really made me appreciate just how valuable, my life is and how I want to make the most of it. And so, anyways, the EMTs come, the police come, my parents come and pick me up and take me home. And thankfully, I'm okay. And there doesn't appear to be any injuries until the next day, whenever I find out I have a bad concussion and I start having chronic neck pain. And so the concussion, is bad with all the symptoms. It was hard to look at the light, and I had some memory loss, just different things like that. And then I started having just really bad neck pain. And so I went back to school. This is at the end of summer, so I went back to school last fall, to college, and which it was really good. Had a good time, but the neck pain just started getting really, really bad. Where it was like if I was sitting, if I was standing, if I was sleeping, it just all the time, 24/7, which is really just intense pain. Um, and also during the summer, I had just some different situations happen where I was just still kind of like processing them and healing from them. And so I had that on top of a lot of, just medical things going on. And so I kind of started getting into just kind of like this little bubble of pain almost, where it almost became like a shield from the outside world. I'm like, well, no one knows what I'm going through. Like, it's just as me, I'm alone. And so I'm just gonna like isolate myself from other people. And I've heard this quote, which I've said a lot over the years because I think it's so true, which is, if the enemy can isolate you, he can influence you. And I think that is so, so true, because the enemy, if he can make you think that you're alone and that no one knows what you're going through, and that, you're just all alone and it's only you, and, God's distant, and like your friends are distant, your family's distant, and if he can, get that in your head, it's so isolating and so just lonely. And I think that just was the case last semester. I had just such amazing friends who were there for me and who checked up on me and everything. But I think I started, as the semester went on, they would ask me like, "How are you doing?" Like, and were being so sweet to check up on me, but I was still the same. I still wasn't good, and so I felt bad for like, continuing to be like, well, I'm not good, again and again. And so I think I kind of just started to distance myself and truly just like, stay in my little bubble, because I wanted to be positive and joyful, joyful Julia, but I couldn't physically do that, because I think I was still just like going through going through this season. And it was also really discouraging because the previous spring I was just so on fire for the Lord. Just so many cool God things happened, where I was just meeting a lot of people and, talking to Jesus about them, and, growing in my faith, and I was on fire for the Lord. And then here I was a few months later, and I was just so lonely, and I was bitter, and I was in pain, and just all these different things. And I'm like, but God, like, what happened? Like, I was following you, and I was walking in the ways of your truth, and I was walking in the paths of righteousness and all these things. And here I am, and it looks like I've backtracked, and I'm, not forwards but backwards. And it just was honestly really discouraging. But fast forward a few months later, it was this early January when me and a good friend of mine actually got the chance to go to Passion, the Passion conference in Atlanta, Georgia, which was just so powerful. Highly recommend going, because just the worship and the speakers and just the presence of God was just so evident there, and it was so cool. And literally every single speaker hit home, just was something I needed to hear, and was so powerful. And I remember specifically one session, me and my friend were at the very top of the stadium. So we were like the second to the top row. So we were almost at the top. And it was really cool though, because you could kind of see just all the people. It was like a bird's eye view, which was really cool. And so there was one speaker who spoke just about pain, and how God can use the pain, and just also how to let go of the pain, and just different things like revolving that. And I remember just like before that, I wasn't able to really let go of just like this kind of like this bitterness and this pain. It was like I'm like, God, like I want you to take it, but I can't let go. Well, at this session, I just remember it was like my breaking point, and like just everything was like, it was just like this awe moment where like, like the shades were lifted off, and I could like finally see the light again. And I remember we had worship after that, and just I remember I like broke and just was like sobbing, and it was like finally all this pain that had been like consuming me, and I was dealing with 24/7 emotionally and physically. I was finally able, God was able just to take it off of me, and I was able to let go. And it was like God had been there all along, like, Julia, like I want to take your pain, like I'm there for you, I'm right here. But it's like I didn't want to let go of it, or I didn't know how to let go of it. But finally in that moment I was able just to let go, and just to truly just give it to the Lord and be like, God, this is yours. Like, I want your peace. Lord, help restore me, help restore our relationship. And I want you again, Lord. I want to seek you. I want to be on fire for you again. I don't want this pain to define me or to be my identity anymore. And it was just such a special, incredible moment where I just truly got to just let go. And it was like a breath of fresh air. And it was like this peace that was like a blanket was just surrounding me. And it was like the Lord. And it was just so cool. And so over the past few months, it's still been really hard. I've been going through just a lot of different medical things, a lot of just different struggles where it feels like, it's so funny because it feels like one thing after the other, just like random medical things where I had to have surgery, I broke my finger, just like all these different, just random medical things. Um, but through it all, the Lord has just been so good and so faithful, and I've learned so much. And it's been hard. I had to medically withdraw from college for the semester due to just a lot of random medical things going on. But through it all, the Lord has been so faithful. He's been so good. And this semester, instead of letting the pain define me and be my identity, and just like using it as like a fortress and no one can get in or out, even me, well, instead I am now not letting the pain define me, but let God define me. And now I have my identity placed in who God says I am. And so now I'm seeking him first. And I'm not perfect. I have moments and days where I definitely don't seek him first. But now it's shifted to where I am now placing my identity in the Lord. And so I still have the pain. I still have a lot of things going on, but I'm not letting them consume or define me. I'm letting God be the one I seek, and God be the one that I let define who I am. And so it's been a special season, just getting to just be with my family and serve in my church and make new friends and just all of the special things. It's been so good. And so if you're in a wilderness season right now, know that I'm with you and that I'm for you. But most importantly, God is with you and God is for you, and he sees you, and he's not going to leave you in the wilderness season to perish, and you're not going to stay there. And God is going to provide you with what you need every step of the way. Just like the Israelites, he provided manna for them just one day at a time. They didn't see the whole picture at once, but they saw the end goal, which was, they're going to make it to the promised land. And so just like that, knowing the end goal is Jesus. And, one day we're going to be in heaven with him, and we're going to get to worship with him forever and be in his presence forever with fellow believers. And so just knowing the end goal and choosing to, run the race with endurance, and choosing, just to pursue the Lord wholeheartedly, unashamedly, and not being ashamed of the gospel, but just truly seeking him first, even, whenever everything around you is chaotic, like Peter, whenever he started looking at the storm and he, saw the waves, he saw the lightning and all the different things, but not letting that be, the defining factor, but rather choosing to keep your eyes solely on the Lord despite your circumstances. And so throughout this podcast, we'll talk about just a lot of deep topics, and I want to be real and honest and vulnerable with you guys. And we will just seek the Lord and his word together. We'll talk, just a lot of different things, just choosing how to have joy and how to remain steadfast whenever things are hard, when life is hard, how to just seek the Lord first, how suffering produces perseverance, and just a lot of different topics surrounding those ideas. And so I'm so excited to see what the Lord does with this podcast, and thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time on the Taste and See podcast.